Howling Retribution. I was looking forward to a fun weekend camping trip with my friends Jake, Alex, and Sarah. Jake and Alex had been my best friends since childhood, and Sarah was a newer addition to our group, but we all got along well. We set up our tents and built a fire, roasting marshmallows and telling ghost stories. I was happy to be surrounded by my friends, feeling the warmth of the fire and the cool breeze of the night. But then, we heard a strange noise in the woods. At first, we tried to convince ourselves that it was just an animal, but as the night wore on, the noises grew louder and more unsettling. We heard footsteps crunching through the leaves, twigs snapping under heavy boots, and a low growling sound that seemed to come from all directions. We were all on edge, jumping at every sound and clinging to each other for comfort. Sarah seemed particularly frightened, clinging to Jake's arm and shaking with fear. Alex tried to keep us calm, but I could tell he was scared too. And then, we heard a long, mournful howl that made the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. We all froze, staring out into the dark woods, wondering what kind of creature could make such a sound. That's when we saw him, a man, tall and gaunt, with wild hair and a crazed look in his eyes. He was holding a bloody axe in one hand, and he was howling like a wolf. We all screamed and ran as fast as we could, trying to escape the madman who seemed to be chasing us through the woods. During the chaos, I lost sight of my friends, and I was too scared to stop and look for them. I just ran as fast as I could, hoping to find someplace safe. But even as I ran, I could hear the killer's howls echoing through the woods, getting closer and closer. I don't know how long I ran, but eventually, I collapsed, gasping for breath. I was alone in the dark, surrounded by trees and the sounds of the night. I didn't know where my friends were, or if they were even still alive. All I could do was wait and hope that help would come soon. The brushes rustled, and I screamed in fear. But it was not the killer. Alex has found me. He said that he lost the sight of other two, and doesn't know wherever they are still alive. Either way, we have to run and get to safety first. As we ran through the woods, trying to escape the deranged killer, I could feel my heart pounding in my chest. I glanced over at Alex, who was running beside me, his eyes wide with fear. We could hear the killer's howls getting closer, and we knew that we had to keep moving. We didn't know where we were going, but we had to get away from him. And then, I saw something that made me want to scream. The killer was running towards us, holding Sarah's decapitated head in his hand. He was laughing and howling like a madman, the blood dripping from his axe. Alex and I were frozen in terror. We couldn't believe what we were seeing. It was like something out of a nightmare. But we didn't have time to process what was happening. The killer was right behind us, and we had to keep moving. We ran as fast as we could, hoping that we could outrun him. But it was no use. The killer was too fast, too strong. He caught up to us in a matter of seconds. Alex tried to fight him off, but the killer was too powerful. He knocked Alex to the ground, and I could hear the sickening thud of his head hitting the earth. I screamed and ran, hoping to find someplace safe. But the killer was right behind me, his axe raised high. I didn't know what to do. I was alone, in the middle of the woods, with a deranged killer chasing me. It felt like there was no way out. And then, he caught up to me. I could feel his breath on my neck, his axe poised to strike. I closed my eyes and waited for the end. But it never came. Instead, I felt a sharp pain in my head, and everything went black. When I woke up, I was in a small hut in the middle of the woods. My head was pounding, and I felt dizzy and disoriented. I looked around, trying to figure out where I was. That's when I saw Jake, sitting beside me. He looked just as scared and confused as I was. I asked him what had happened, and he told me that he had been running through the woods, trying to find me, when he stumbled upon the hut. He had broken in and found me lying on the floor, unconscious. We tried to leave the hut, but the door was locked from the outside. It seemed like the killer had trapped us there, with no way out. We huddled together in the dark, waiting for something to happen. But there was only silence, broken only by the occasional howl of the killer in the distance. We were trapped, with no idea of what would happen next. It felt like time was not moving and running at breakneck speed at the same time. Finally, the door opened up with a long creak. As the killer stood before us, I could feel the terror rising inside me. He explained his twisted motives, telling us that he was seeking revenge on my mother for rejecting him and called him a dog. The sound of his howling echoed through the cabin, sending shivers down my spine. He had loved her deeply, he said, and her rejection had caused him to spiral into a world of darkness. He had become obsessed with her, stalking her every move. And when he realized that she was never going to return his love, he decided to take revenge. The reason he howled like a wolf was because he had decided to become one. My mother had stumbled upon him one day while she was hiking and had called him a mangy dog. But instead of taking the insult to heart, he had embraced it and decided to transform himself into something more powerful. He had been planning this for years, he said, waiting for the perfect opportunity to strike. And when he had heard that my mother's daughter was going on a camping trip, he knew that he had found his chance. Suddenly, he pulled out a deck of cards and spread them out on the table. "We're going to play a little game," he said, his eyes gleaming with excitement. "If you win, you get to leave. But if you lose, you die." My heart pounded in my chest as he explained the rules of the game. We had to choose a card from the deck, and the one who drew the lowest card would die. I glanced over at Alex, who looked as terrified as I felt. We knew we had no choice but to play along with the killer's twisted game. We each drew a card, and my heart sank as I saw that I had drawn the lowest card. I looked up at the killer, who grinned evilly. "Looks like you lose," he said, pulling out a knife. I backed away as he approached me, ready to strike. But before he could make his move, Alex leaped across the table and tackled him to the ground. The two of them struggled for control, and I scrambled to my feet and ran out of the cabin. I didn't stop running until I had made it to the nearest town, where I called the police. They searched the woods, but the killer and Alex were nowhere to be found. Days turned into weeks, and I lived in constant fear that the killer would come back for me. Then, one day, the police found Alex's body deep in the woods. He had been brutally murdered, and the killer was nowhere to be found. I knew then that I was the only survivor, the only one who knew the truth about what had happened in those woods. The sound of the killer's howling still echoed in my mind, a constant reminder of the twisted game he had forced us to play. If you enjoyed this story, please like, comment, and subscribe for more terrifying stories. Your support helps me create more content like this.